Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life. Well, I'm back with Jakob Palmqvist, and after our last call, Jacob and I were discussing his life and where he is in the world, and even more information about what he wants to bring to all of us. And he mentioned the language of money, and I thought, wow, what a perfect opportunity to bring Jakob back. And it's a first for the Miracle You. Jakob, you're the very first person to come back on the podcast twice. So distinction now. You can put that in your resume.
I thought it was guinea pig.
Not the guinea pig, not for sure. But I'd like to remind everybody who Jakob is. You know, Jakob asked the question, what does it mean to live life on your own terms? You know, he had a dramatic wake-up call, and it really ignited him on his path. It was a path away from finance and the rat race, leaving his old self and the life of conformity behind. Now he wants to serve others so that they too can start living their life on their terms. And as you know, imagination, that's very much about what we're all about here, living life on your own terms and finding your magical miracle life. So Jakob, could you share a little bit about the language of money, and then we can get into a nice discussion?
Yes. So, of course, since I resigned a couple of years ago, as you mentioned, I used to be in finance, and that was like the thing for me since I was a kid. I was always fascinated by numbers and investments and so forth. And along the way, you obviously get to understand more of how it works sort of behind the scenes. And when I was doing more and more contemplation, and after stepping away from my little finance bubble, I realized there are a lot of things happening that a lot of people don't seem to be aware of, or they just don't know, or they can't be bothered taking the time to actually understand. And it's costing them massively over time. And that's why I've spent some time focusing on sort of wealth. And that can be obviously interpreted in many different ways. But in terms of the language of money, it is just like any other language, because if you compare it to your native tongue, that is probably the most important language to understand. Then, secondly, everybody in the world needs to understand the language of money. It is completely universal. You will obviously express it differently depending on the language, but it means exactly the same thing. And you will need it from when you are, 5, 6, 7 years old, up until 100 plus or whatever, however old you're going to become, right? And the sad thing, or what hurts me, is when people are doing things because they just don't take the time, or they don't have the knowledge or the insight, or they don't ask people. And it's costing them dearly in terms of money, but also in terms of stress. And there's numerous studies, obviously, in particular about from the States, saying that around 60% of the US population are financially stressed. And why is that? And if you talk to someone, ask them about, should we discuss your 401k? You get sort of a panic look in their eyes and like, woo, shivering. It's like, why? We're talking about your future, even though it might be far down the line or not that far down the line, but still. And if that is your reaction, it probably means you should do something, because unfortunately, it is very likely that someone else is making a lot of money on your behalf, and that is money that should be staying in your pocket. And that is what I've been talking a lot about, the money language, or the language of money, basically just learning the basics. It's like anything else. Once you learn the few basic things, it's easy to add new things, understand more, understand deeper, and you can go as far as you want or as shallow as you want, but just understanding the basics. And I've done loads of numerical sort of loads of numbers, basically, just to understand and get a feeling for what kind of implication are we talking about. And if I were to give you one number, say that you then had a twin brother, and both of you are, let's say, 35 years old. And you decide, well, we need to save a little bit, either in our 401k or for our retirement. And both of you do the same thing. And the market, so you invest in the stock market, and say that the average return is around 8%. So both of you are happy campers along the way. You turn 65 and you've invested $1,000 every month from 35 years old. So for 30 years, so it's a long period of time. And on average, you turn 8%. And then you guys, one of you has a big ass smile, a 1.7 million smile. And then you look across the table at your brother, and his smile is not as broad as yours. And it's like, what? My statement is saying 900K. But we were both invested in the same market. We had the same annual return, but the difference is $700,000. And it can be down to one decision. And that is knowing how much you're paying in fees. So the only difference between the two examples is the one is making sure to minimizing the fees, getting them to as close to zero as possible. Whilst the other one, I couldn't really be bothered because it was so boring, didn't really understand. We're listening to someone who said they understood. And for some reason, 3% per annum sort of disappeared along the way to the tune of $700,000. One decision once, but you have to live with it for, well, a long period of time.
What a great example, Jakob. And living that long period of time is the important thing. You know, one of the things that I find, especially with some of my clients and people that I work with in workshops, a lot of it is just beliefs kind of wrapped around money. And it's not necessarily the money belief. It's the belief that, well, I'm not good with numbers, or I don't understand money, or people who are rich or people who have been raised around money, they're the ones that can understand it, but the rest of us can't. So could you share a little bit of that language with us?
One, I would say that is absolute bullshit, unless you have some kind of severe handicap, which makes you, well, basically, if you have a super hard time learning new things, then maybe I would agree to that statement. But otherwise, it's complete bullshit, complete nonsense. The only thing is, it's not a big enough priority. And you might be telling yourself, or the person who expresses himself like that, or she obviously needs to change the way they're looking at things. If they can learn anything, if they can read a book and remember anything from that book, they can learn the language of money and the simple things. And everything starts with taking control, which means you need obviously to understand what is my income, the money flowing in, and two, where's it going, and taking control. That is where it starts. Because as soon as you start taking control and basically saying, I'm going to be the boss over my money, and if you make conscious decision in terms of where the money is going, a lot of people are going to realize, like, shit, am I spending this amount of money on that? What do I have to show for it? Possibly nothing. And if you keep it in your pocket, most likely you wouldn't have any or very little financial stress, because all of a sudden you will realize that you always have money, which is a massive, massive difference. And imagine what happens if you do that consistently. You start going through saying, something needs to change. I don't want to live from paycheck to paycheck. What can I do? Well, if you look around, you might be the average of your 5 closest friends, but it doesn't have to be. And as we spoke about last time, your closest friends doesn't have to be in the physical world. They can be on these, which you can't see, but basically you can have someone on headphones listening to who's speaking a different language than your closest 5 friends physically. But if you start taking control, your income, your expenses, and just say, what can I do? Can I make some changes to make sure there's something left at the end of the month? And if you do that for a few months, you realize, okay, now I have money. Then you might say, what am I going to do with this money? And there's so much information available. The easiest thing, if you think it's so boring, is, of course, talk to someone who speaks the language and ask them for help. Where should I start? What's the simplest thing I can do just to do something with the money I now have. And what happens is, once you start seeing that, well, actually your pile of money is increasing, maybe initially just because you're putting more money aside in a savings account, but then you might take a small step out, say, maybe I want to do something a little bit more long-term-ish, making my money work for me. Like Warren Buffett says, one of the biggest financial geniuses of all time, and billionaire, most people probably have heard about him. He's like, well, if you're not making money while you sleep, you probably have to work until you die. And that is the scary thing. It's like, do you want to do that, or do you want to figure out a way to make money when you sleep? And the simple way over time has been to be invested in the stock market. And over time, it's been an extraordinary journey for most people, depending on the timing. But if you've been long-term, you've made a lot of money. And again, what happens is when you start thinking about how can I maybe save a little bit more initially, and then say, how can I invest a little bit, maybe in the US stock market? You have the big names. Why not own a piece of, say, Coca-Cola or Apple, or whichever company it is whose product you're already using, Disney or whatever it might be, and say, if I'm still buying their products, maybe I could get a little piece of the action. And you can do that directly via single stocks. I know this is a little bit sort of financial terms now, but you can also invest broadly. And if you start doing that, and over time you see your money actually growing with you doing absolutely nothing. So from having maybe $100 to a few thousand, 10,000, maybe 50,000, then you're probably going to say, if I have 50K, I guess I would like them to grow even more. And surprise, all of a sudden you might have an interest, or you might realize, I do actually understand this money language I didn't understand before. Why? Because all of a sudden you found it more and more interesting and appealing, because you know that it makes a massive difference, one, to you, to the people around you, and to your family. But you can only start where you stand. So the small step would be, well, face it, meaning face your expenses and see what you can do, because there's always something to be done. And again, if you don't know where to start, well, of course, you can check out my website, but otherwise, talk to someone who understands and are good with money, not your friends who's just spending it all every time. Learn from someone else. For sure, there has to be someone close to you who can give you a few pointers saying, well, if you just think about this, or if you just do this, this will be the result after a few months, maybe after a year or a couple of years. And when you realize what you can do wherever you start, just starting getting that momentum will make the journey so much easier. And I guarantee that you will find it all of a sudden, this money-making thingy machine that is sort of making me richer every day is maybe not so hard to understand, at least not the basics. And you don't have to be a genius. You just have to be part of the journey. You don't have to understand how Apple is doing everywhere in the world, or how Facebook are doing all over, or Microsoft or Coca-Cola, whoever it is. But if you think, and if you go through and diversify a little bit, maybe you want to have a piece, say, I do still think that Coca-Cola will be around in 20 years' time. And if I can just get a little, tiny piece of the action whilst I drink my Coke, hey, why not?
You know, Jakob, one of the interesting things, I just had a podcast with another financial individual that shared some very similar information. But one of the interesting things that he said was that until you start feeling safe and feeling comfortable, it's really hard to step into who you are and what you're meant to be. And we have a very diverse audience here. So I'm going to handle it in 3 segments, and I'm going to ask you about roadblocks and how to get around them. So for the first segment, I'm just getting started. Yes, I've been taking part in enjoying the materialistic world, and I realize that, you know, I really want to start looking out for me and my future and maybe my family. What roadblocks for somebody that's just getting started are out there, and how do they get around them?
I think it's a very good comment, the one that you were referring to in terms of the challenges, because there will be a lot of internal blockages or things stopping you, if you're constantly worried, constantly thinking about something, potentially negatively about money. And if you walk around every day with negative thoughts, worrying about money, for sure it's going to affect you. And it's going to be a lot harder figuring out what it is that maybe that you want to do, how you want to live your life. It's like, first thing you have to do is obviously take control over your own house, meaning yourself. And as soon as you're starting to lower the financial stress and maybe anxiety, the easier things will be, both obviously in the financial world, but also in terms of how you're living your life. But in terms of the question you specifically asked, I would say, and again, I would refer back to what I mentioned a few minutes back, would be if the people around you are paycheck to paycheck, spending their money, always asking, why haven't you got maybe the new phone, the new jacket, the new car, or the latest, whatever it might be? That is a big, big reason for a lot of stress and basically fear of other people's opinions. And I do not want anybody to live based on other people's opinions. And that's the hard thing when we have it all around us all the time, and we have it on our phones, maybe constantly bombarded with messages and pictures, whatever. So the first thing is obviously figuring out, again, what is it that is truly important to you? Maybe you should just write down a list of the 5 or 10 things that are most important to you and your family. And if it is the new shoes or having a brand new car, then maybe so. But for most people, that's not the case. And what you can do is obviously join, say, online communities. So again, you can have the people on your phone or in your head seeing, how are other people handling this? How do they think? What do they do? And again, a lot of the time, it doesn't even show. I mean, you don't have to go from spending 100% of your income down to 10 or 20% or whatever is possible. And in most instances, if you have 30 sweaters back home, who would know that you have 30 or if you have 5? Or if you have 20 white shirts and 10 suits, maybe you just need 2 suits or whatever it is. Most people would have no clue. The only difference would be that maybe some of them would observe it, but eventually when you figure out how much more money you have in your pocket because you're not spending the way the people around you are spending, you're going to smile every time you go to the bank. Every time you look at your account, you're going to have a big ass smile. And what's going to happen is that you're going to change from this fear of missing out or fear of other people's opinion to joy of missing out. You're actually going to say, actually, that car driving over there, it's 40K. I know because I didn't buy it, because I was smart about my car decision. Within a few decades, I will have $500,000 in the account instead. That would put a big smile on most people's faces. And that could go for small things as well. It's like, oh, that person bought the new watch for 5K. Yeah, but they bought it on a credit card. So in the end, they'll probably have to pay 15K because they can't afford it. I do the other way around. So in the same period of time, my 5K will probably be 15 or something along those lines. And again, then you change completely how you're thinking about money, how you're relating to money. And what I would do, and I have that we offered it last time if people listen to the previous podcast, a book about money mindset hacks. And a couple of them to mention in this instance, because it's relating to what I was just saying, would be when I am thinking about buying something, one of the first thing would be to say, is this a nice to have or a need to have? And if it's a nice to have, okay, but is it a need? And then again, it's just a matter of your priorities. And most of the time, it's just nice to have, it's no need.
Right.
And there are a few of those questions you can ask yourself just to say, am I just being spontaneous, or am I doing this because of impulse, or why am I purchasing this? And is it going to make me or my family happier a few weeks, a few months, a year down the line? Or it's actually better to use the same amount of money, save it, and do the same thing, same savings for a little while, and then we go for a weekend with the family. Would they enjoy that? Or would they enjoy me bringing home a big pizza every 3 days or whatever it might be?
Yeah, another amazing question to ask yourself is, are you expecting a certain feeling because you go out and purchase something? Because that feeling doesn't come from that $40,000 car or even a vacation with the family. The feeling comes from being with the family and experiencing the love. So that the realize that you're not purchasing what you're really looking for in a lot of the things that we go out and buy. Let me ask you another question. So now I'm a little bit older. I'm
Are you?
Vince's age now. I
Vince's
am
age.
a little bit older. I'm 60 years old, and it seems that the language of money has been changing over the last few years. How do I work with those roadblocks?
Um, Honestly, I didn't know that it had changed. If anything, or maybe you want to give me an example, but otherwise I would just say, if it has changed, it is most likely the development of the financial industry because they're realizing, shit, people are understanding what we're saying, how much we're charging, and for what we're charging because of increased transparency, more information, regulatory changes. So they too will have to change if they want to keep up their profit margins and so forth. So I would say if you learn, I have sort of a dictionary on my site. But if you learn the most basic words within the financial language or financial literature, I'm pretty sure you would be very, very comfortable in most situations in terms of money. And the other thing is, when you understand the language of money, you understand how it will impact your life. So if they're saying, well, I read the news or heard the news that the Fed is increasing rates. Yeah, but if you don't know what the Federal Reserve is or what they're doing, you probably won't have a clue what impact it might have on your household finances. It might be, well, actually, your mortgage just increased and it's going to be another $1,000 a month, and you didn't even know. Or it might mean that the company that you're working for, that they will have financial issues because maybe the business cycle is turning for the worse. You might even lose your job, but you don't know because you didn't understand or didn't want to understand the signs. So you're happy walking up to work one day and it's like, why is the door no longer open? My company went bankrupt. What happened? Well, if you knew what happened based on how interest rates changed, what is happening with the unemployment level, and what is happening with companies and the growth in the economy and so forth, and how it impacts you, that's a massive thing. And that's the other thing I quickly wanted to mention is you should always compare your interest rate on your mortgage. If you have a mortgage, you should always compare, always ask a handful of banks to make sure you pay as little as possible. That is one thing that you can do. And if you do that, it can again save you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. And if you hate that, you don't want to talk to a bank, whatever, most likely you can do it online or beg a friend who's good at it to do it on your behalf and even pay them $1,000 or whatever, because it might save you a lot more. And that's another thing. So we're talking about your life, your financial situation, your kids' financial situation. And there are a few things we for sure should make sure that we do to make as much out of this as we possibly can. I mean, it's not about money for that purpose, but not having to be stressed about money, knowing that you have money and that you can handle money, because otherwise every other conversation about money means that you'll be stressed about it. Oh shit, someone's talking about money. Oh, boring, or I can't be bothered. And it goes for everything, because everything you purchase, same thing, it's about money. So if you're handing in your car for repair, how do you know if you're going to spend $500 or $5,000? Unless you understand the problem, or roughly, or you actually say, nope, I'm going to go and ask 5 different mechanics. And all of a sudden, why am I now paying half the price I used to pay? Well, similar to using a comparison website, because all of a sudden it's competition, and that is money that you have paid taxes on that is staying in your pocket, which is where they should be. But sorry, coming back to your question again. So how do you feel it has changed sort of the landscape or the language?
You know, we're getting close on time, so I want to ask you another question, if you don't mind.
Please.
Could you give us 5 words out of your dictionary that you believe people should find out what they mean and find out why they're important to them?
Good question. Income, expenses. That is your own income and expenses. That's the first step. 3, how to invest in the stock market. So stock market or stocks.
Okay.
Same.
Okay.
Debt and compounding. A weird one maybe, but compounding is basically interest on interest or return on return. And that is why this Warren Buffett guy is so rich, because he's done it over a very long period of time. And the longer period of time, the faster it goes. It's a big ass snowball. Those are the ones.
Excellent.
If you want more, check out the website because there are more there.
Excellent. Well, on that note, could you give us one last parting piece of guidance and then how people can get in touch with you and learn more?
In terms of the financial language, just ask yourself if you think the decisions you are making and will be making over the course of your life will have an impact on how you can live your life and how your family can live your life. And if it's worthwhile or not for you and your family members not to start learning that language, maybe together, maybe now. That would be it. And there are some informations about it on my website, Action to Happy, Healthy, Wealthy, where I show you what to do, how you can do things, how you can think about things, basically how you can make sure that you have more money in your pocket and not in someone else's pocket. That is the purpose, because then you have more time to spend on what you really want to do, not worrying about money and finance.
Excellent, sir. So for everybody that's listening, don't worry about rewinding and recording. Just go to the show page. That information on Jakob's website will be there, as well as some more information on where you can find Jakob in social media and so on and so forth. Jakob, speaking of family, I want to congratulate you and your wife on your new baby girl. It's so exciting, and I know that because of your language of money, your family is going to be well taken care of, and your little girl's got a step ahead of the rest of the pack, if you will, as she moves forward in her life.
Thank you so much. And fingers crossed, you can interview her in 15 years, so we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Once again, Mary and I wish you the most miracle of days, and thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Pleasure as always.
Have a good day.
You too.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 mind-awakening steps toward your unique purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.